All right, YouTube, the glorious paradise that is socialist Venezuela. I think sometimes people forget it's a socialist nation, in the style of Bernie Sanders, continues to slide backwards. It's still collapsing. It's just a matter of time. However, there is one little dot of light on an otherwise dark void that is the future of Venezuelan people because of idiots like Maduro. The one good thing going on is apparently they have beer production back, which is, I mean, people have known for centuries if you keep the masses a little bit tipsy, they're easier to manage, generally speaking, because they'll say, oh, fuck this, I'm going to riot tomorrow. Then they get a little bit drunk, and they're like, I'm just going to listen to some music or something like that. It keeps them easier to manage. It's sort of like the bread and circus, only the bread's been turned into beer at this point. That's basically all they have, though. It's not like there's a whole lot of food left in the Venezuelan state. Now, the OAS is considering kicking them out altogether. They've faced stiff reprisal from most of the other Latin American states. There aren't a whole lot of people left that are stupid enough not to comprehend just the sheer tyranny that's going on in the Venezuelan state. When I speak of tyranny, I think sometimes people forget, some of the socialists forget, I also call out right-wing tyranny when I see it. Like, 10 years ago, when the internet was being censored by the right wing, I was as much against that as I am now the censorship of the EU and sort of the tech firms partnering with the EU to try to crack down on so-called hate speech. It's still authoritarianism. It's still retarded. It still prevents the free flow of ideas. It still stymies human progress as a total. So I'm still going to be against it. It doesn't fucking matter. But in the case of Venezuela, we are dealing with a socialist state. It's the purest form of socialism you can possibly imagine. That's what it is. The fact that the socialists of the world, or those on the far left who aren't quite, so they're like progressive or something, they're not quite socialists, they don't want to admit that Venezuela's even using socialism. They want to call it something totally different. Oh, this isn't really socialism because insert reason here. And yet if you define socialism, it's exactly what is being done in the state of Venezuela. The ease with which Maduro, who supposedly is constrained by a constitution, although doesn't certainly act like he is able to nationalize various factories, yes, like nationalism, to do his bidding when there aren't even supplies to keep them operating. They were already state co-opted by bureaucracy. Now they're just state-run altogether. He's moving towards more and more a central planning model. Instead of trying to privatize some things to get things booming again so that people can actually, at the very least, have food, if not all these other items that are considered extravagant luxuries like an air conditioner or an iPad or something. Instead of doing that, which is what he should be doing in order to allow foreign money to come in and ease relations with some of these other governments in the world, Venezuela, which is an oil state, and that's really all their economy is, has decided to cloister itself more, isolate itself more. Foreign firms are pulling out. Venezuela increasingly is going to have itself in Cuba, and that's really all it's going to have. Well, the problem is Venezuela can't even feed its own population. It doesn't. Right now, they're still in the middle of a drought with 2 days a week of electricity. All of the foreign money has begun leaving. Unemployment has spiked, which means more people in the bread lines that were already deeply strained because there was already a cutting of imports of various goods which they need just to survive, to the point where most of the Venezuelans now, in the middle class, are going without a meal a day. They're dumpster diving to ameliorate some of the problems in their diet. Meanwhile, Maduro has electricity 7 days a week, as any other world leader will automatically have. He has the armed guards. Most of the Venezuelans are disarmed. He has the rich food. Many Venezuelans now are malnourished. He has access to the best medical care. He's got his own private medical staff, and he can always go abroad for some sort of treatment if he really has the need to do so. The average Venezuelan, when they get seen by the doctor now, they don't even have like latex gloves to put on. They can't even afford those. They don't have a fucking thermometer. They don't have anything, to the point people have to buy their own stuff in order to go in to get treated, and half the time there's not even electricity necessary to actually undergo even a minor form of surgery. A lot of infants and small children right now are keeling over in Venezuela and dying. The big problem, I pointed this out, is epidemiological. That is, you can get a pandemic can be spawned in such a situation where you have a population, it's in a tropical climate where you've got exotic diseases, let's face it, in a state where there is no longer a functioning medical apparatus, let's face it, it no longer has any functioning hospitals, even in its capital. And you have a population that is being weakened as far as their immunity goes by malnourishment. It's the perfect storm for some sort of epidemic to come along, and we need, as a world, perhaps, to begin taking such a situation seriously, specifically because an epidemic spawned in a country full of malnourished peasants who eat one meal a day and don't have a medical infrastructure. If it engulfs that country severely enough, it will leak out through those borders. Even if there are no flights to and from Venezuela, you think it won't reach Colombia and Brazil and Guyana and these surrounding states, and then perhaps go further until the point at which it becomes self-sustaining, burns its way through all of Latin America or something. Now, there may be some like white nationalists who don't give a shit about that, but you've got to realize the way in which the world works, simply putting up a border fence isn't going to cause little tiny microbes potentially from not crossing that border. They don't really care that there's a fence or a wall or an embankment or something there. We need to take that seriously. Perhaps the other Latin American states need to at least prepare for the possibility that they have to intervene in the state of Venezuela. The United States should take a hands-off approach. We shouldn't intervene because that gives credence to everything that Maduro has said. And the Colombians would probably want to sit it out too because there seems to be some bad blood there. But Maduro is making life miserable for his own people. There's no real end in sight. Oil prices are well below the threshold at which they can at least break even. They're to the point where pumping oil out right now, they're losing money doing so. It's not going to help their economy, and that's 95% of their exports. They can't even fuel their own machines. They can't even refine their own oil. They have to send it out as crude. So the Venezuelan state hangs in the balance right now, and the people of Venezuela are the ones suffering. Maduro's not suffering. Does he look malnourished to you? No, he looks just fine. He still gets his caviar 3 meals a day. He and his generals and the upper level bureaucrats, they're not. The problem with a socialist system is inevitably those at the top are not subjected to socialism. They don't have to worry about socialized medicine sucks, about socialized roads have potholes in them and are kind of fucked up or underdeveloped, that socialist economic models bring a collapse about that causes the population to begin becoming malnourished. They don't have to worry. They're not operating within the same socialism they force others to operate under. That's why I support a free market. In a free market, you don't have that problem. Somebody who's super rich can still lose everything potentially if they're stupid. But in Maduro's Venezuela, Maduro doesn't worry because the guns are facing outwards. And unless the opposition manages to get some of those guns facing inwards, Maduro still will retain a stranglehold over the Venezuelan state. There is hope in the form of them being further isolated by the other Latin American states. If the U.S. were to increase pressure, say, oh, more embargoes and stuff, it would actually be a bad thing potentially, because then Maduro will just say, look, I told you, great Satan United States trying to oust me in a horrible coup against glorious revolutionary socialism or something. Get some of the other left-leaning states in the region that Maduro can't necessarily scapegoat for all of his problems, get them involved potentially if things begin actually collapsing. But right now, when you've got a capital city where there are 4 or 5 major protests being held every goddamn day, I'd say that's teetering pretty close to the brink of collapse. And let's make no mistake, this is authentic, real socialism by the dictionary definition. You can make up all the excuses that you want for why this isn't real socialism, but only a few years ago, when things were looking up in Venezuela, it was heralded as the glorious gem of socialism, as being the best possible socialist model. Growth was strong, and people were becoming more wealthy, and malnutrition decreased, illiteracy went down, infrastructure slowly creeped out from Caracas, and everything was fine. Back then they said, oh, socialism works, see, we should use it here. Now they're not saying that, though, now, are they? Now they're pointing at the Nordic model of democratic socialism, Bernie Sanders style. Well, that will fail too in time. You watch, you'll get to see it firsthand. You just have to wait a little bit longer because, as far as I know, they're not monocultured economies. Close, but no, they're not quite monocultured. It'll take them longer to collapse. That's about all. Peace out.